Today marked the children's 10th birthday, the day their future would be decided. According to tradition, every child would contract a beast that would absorb the excess mana poisoning their young bodies. The ceremony master stood before the altar with his silver rank level 2 beast and declared the beginning of the sacred ceremony. He reminded everyone that a person's place in society depended on the rank of their beast. Iron beasts belonged to slaves, bronze beasts to workers, and silver beasts to the privileged. He didn't even mention the higher ranks. Only 5 families in the entire city possessed gold rank beasts, while the king alone commanded a platinum beast. One by one, the children stepped forward with their eggs. When Ron Blackfire placed his red egg on the altar, it cracked apart in a burst of flames. A crimson salamander emerged from the ashes, its scarlet scales glowing like burning embers. The tiny beast immediately displayed its power by creating a perfect fireball above Ron's hand. Although it started as an iron rank beast, everyone knew it possessed tremendous potential. With proper cultivation, it could evolve beyond bronze and even reach silver rank. Combined with his family's resources and cultivation techniques, Ron's future already seemed secure. Even as a newborn, the salamander granted him enhanced strength and the ability to cast fireballs, earning him cheers and admiration from everyone present. Then the ceremony master called Ren's name. Unlike the colorful eggs held by the other children, Ren carried only a dull gray egg, the cheapest his parents could afford after selling everything they owned. It represented his family's last hope. Ren knew exactly what his chances were. The gray egg had a 94.99% chance of producing a common plant, an ordinary iron rank beast that could barely reach bronze rank with enough effort. There was also a 5% chance of obtaining a marsh frog, a much better beast capable of reaching the highest bronze rank. Ren had long accepted that the plant was the most likely outcome and promised himself he would work hard enough to give his parents a decent life. But there was one final possibility. The gray egg was infamous because of its 1 in 10,000 chance of producing a spore. While rare outcomes in expensive eggs often produced beasts with silver or even gold potential, the rare outcome in the failure's egg was the weakest creature ever recorded. A spore could not even mature properly within the iron rank, making it almost worthless in a world where strength determined everything. As Ren approached the altar, Klein Goldcrest mocked him for carrying the failure's egg, causing the other children to laugh. The ceremony master silenced them and reminded everyone that this was the moment they would become tamers. Ren ignored the ridicule and focused only on his egg, silently praying for anything except the spore. The first rays of sunlight entered the temple, but unlike the brilliant glow of the other eggs, Ren's barely shined at all. It cracked with nothing more than a weak, dry sound. Instead of flames or dazzling light, a small cloud of gray spores slowly drifted out. The laughter erupted instantly. Ren had drawn the impossible 1 in 10,000 result. Even the ceremony master's command for silence couldn't completely hide the amusement in his voice, as he instructed Ren to extend his hand and receive his companion. The cloud floated lazily onto Ren's palm. It had no weight, no warmth, and none of the powerful presence that every other beast displayed. It simply hovered there, weak and useless. Whispers spread through the crowd as everyone realized Ren had truly received the infamous 0.01% outcome. Despite the humiliation, Ren refused to lower his head. His parents had sacrificed everything to buy that gray egg, and no matter how loudly the others laughed, he would not let them see him break. Ren kept his head high as he walked away from the altar. His parents had sacrificed everything for this day, selling their possessions and working endless shifts. No matter how humiliating the outcome was, he refused to let the other children see him cry. A faint flash marked the completion of his contract. The bond with the spore granted him only a 10% increase in physical strength. For someone as weak as Ren, that meant little more than carrying an extra bucket of water or working a little longer in the fields. Every other beast provided meaningful abilities alongside physical enhancements, but the spore offered nothing beyond that tiny increase. The contrast became obvious the moment Ron's contract fully activated. Crimson scales spread across his arms, his nails sharpened into claws, his fangs lengthened, and his eyes glowed with a golden light. His crimson salamander granted him control over fire, a 40% increase in strength, and boosts to his speed, endurance, and reflexes. As the beast evolved, Those enhancements would continue to grow, eventually making him several times stronger than an ordinary person. Even the common plant Ren had hoped to receive would have granted better bonuses from the very beginning. The spore was the only known beast without a true base ability. Whispers spread through the crowd as people mocked how worthless it was. Bound by ceremony, Ren remained where he was and watched the remaining summonings. One child contracted a wind eagle that sharpened reflexes. Another received an earth bear that greatly increased physical resistance. A mystic fox improved its master's senses and perception. Then the final child approached the altar. Luna Starweaver placed an expensive black egg on the pedestal, and the entire temple fell silent. Lightning-like cracks spread across its shell before a majestic shadow wolf emerged, radiating overwhelming power. As Luna formed her contract, an incredible aura surrounded her, granting immense speed, enhanced senses, and the ability to manipulate multiple forms of elemental magic. The ceremony master announced that the beast possessed gold rank potential, an outcome with less than a 1% chance even from a high-quality black egg. Ren could only watch as Luna secured a future that placed her among the city's elite. Soon after, the true transformations began. Freed from the mana poisoning that had burdened them throughout childhood, the newly contracted beasts fused with their tamers. Children developed glowing markings, sharper eyes, strengthened bodies, and other visible signs of power. Each transformation reflected the unique abilities of their companion. Then Ren's turn came. Instead of a dramatic transformation, the spore quietly dissolved into his body. For a brief moment, nothing happened. Then tiny glowing mushrooms sprouted from his scalp. The temple erupted with laughter. Children mocked him relentlessly, comparing the mushrooms to a disease and pretending they could catch whatever he had. Even after the ceremony master demanded silence, the ridicule continued. Trying to preserve some dignity, he explained that a fully matured spore could eventually reach 50 centimeters in size and increase physical strength by 20%. Instead of helping, the explanation only caused even more laughter because everyone knew how difficult and expensive it was to raise a spore, all for a reward weaker beasts possessed from birth. While Luna's transformation covered her body with elegant silver markings and an aura of overwhelming strength, the mushrooms on Ren's head became the symbol of his disgrace. The ceremony master announced that, in 1 week, all of them would begin 8 years of formal education before eventually entering military service. He instructed everyone to keep their beasts fused as a sign of respect for the sacred bond, and the ceremony finally came to an end. Only after leaving the temple did Ren stop. Away from the laughter and pitying stares, he expelled the spore from his body. The glowing mushrooms disappeared, and the tiny gray creature floated silently beside his shoulder once again. He no longer cared about tradition or appearances. His parents had spent decades saving over 1 million crystals and even sold their home to buy that single gray egg. Yet, everything had been destroyed by a single stroke of bad luck. As Ren made the long walk home, the silent spore drifting beside him became a constant reminder of what he had lost and of the future that now awaited him. The walk home felt endless. As Ren left the city center behind, elegant streets gave way to dirt roads, and grand buildings were replaced by modest homes until he reached the small cabin on the outskirts. It was no longer truly his family's home. After selling everything they owned, his parents now rented the very house that had once belonged to them. Standing outside the door, Ren hesitated. The smell of sweet root stew and freshly baked bread drifted through the cracks, making his stomach growl. His parents were gifted cooks, and despite having only mature iron-rank plant beasts, they had managed to keep jobs in one of the city's humble kitchens. Their employer had given them a chance, but it was their cooking skill that allowed them to stay. Inside, his mother moved through the kitchen with practiced grace, while his father carefully placed the last 3 candles they owned on the table. They had prepared a celebration using everything they could afford. Ren finally opened the door. His parents immediately noticed the small gray spore floating beside him. Ren watched the hope disappear from their faces in a single instant. Even so, his mother smiled gently and opened her arms. "My little tamer." The tears Ren had been holding back all day finally broke free. He could only apologize over and over, blaming himself for wasting everything they had sacrificed. His father knelt in front of him and reminded him of the time he had accidentally burned an entire batch of bread. Instead of throwing it away, they had cut it into cubes and turned it into croutons. Sometimes life didn't give people what they wanted, he said, but that didn't mean something good couldn't still come from what remained. Ren tried to argue that the spore changed everything, but his mother simply told him it was now part of him, and they loved every part of their son. His father added that it didn't matter whether Ren had contracted a spore or a dragon. But Ren knew it did matter. The family gathered around the small table, filled with the best meal his parents could prepare despite their circumstances. Sweet root stew, fresh bread, and even wild berries for dessert covered the table beneath the warm glow of 3 candles. His mother served him a generous portion and encouraged him to eat. His father gently insisted after Ren refused, yet the disappointment inside him was stronger than his appetite. Unable to bear another moment, Ren apologized once more before running to his room, the gray spore silently following behind him. His mother called after him, asking him to at least take some bread, but the only answer was the sound of his bedroom door closing. The hours passed without improvement. Every attempt to bring him food ended with the same reply: "I'm not hungry." Alone in the darkness, Ren stared at the faint glow of the spore floating beside him. In only 1 week, he would begin school. 1 week remained before he had to face classmates who had already laughed at him, and before he entered a future everyone believed had already been decided. Meanwhile, his parents sat alone in the dining room beside the unsigned remains of their celebration. On the table lay the school contract Ren was legally required to fulfill. For 8 years, he would attend the School of Cultivation and Evolution, where every child learned to strengthen their beast. It was one of the finest schools in the kingdom, and gaining admission had cost over 1 million crystals. Now, at 60 years old, the couple could only stare at the document. Decades of work, their savings, their home, and every sacrifice they had made had been poured into giving Ren the opportunity they never had. They had hoped a normal plant beast could eventually reach bronze rank, opening the door to a better future than their own. But with a spore, that dream had collapsed. Ren's mother tearfully reminded her husband that the payment was already made, and the law required every contracted child to complete their education. His father blamed himself, wishing illness and expensive medicine hadn't prevented them from buying a better egg. His wife immediately stopped him, insisting none of it was his fault. Yet as they looked at everything they had sacrificed, only one question remained between them. What had they done? Their dream had always been to give Ren a better future, but everything had changed the moment he contracted the spore. Ren's father slumped into his chair, unable to hide his despair. For the next 8 years, his son would attend the School of Cultivation and Evolution, surrounded by children whose beasts would grow stronger, while his own remained almost unchanged. A spore couldn't evolve its rank. There were no cultivation paths, no secret techniques, and no hidden methods worth pursuing. Wealthy families had already spent fortunes trying to make the creature useful, and the only recorded success had produced nothing more than a mature spore that granted a mere 20% increase in strength. Instead of becoming a symbol of achievement, the spore had become the very symbol of failure. Ren would spend years studying lessons he could never truly use while enduring endless ridicule. The silence in the room eventually drew Ren's father back to an old memory. He asked his wife if she remembered the day he had gone searching for medicine after supplies ran out during a severe outbreak of mana poisoning. While searching, he had mistakenly gathered a strange plant, believing it was a valuable 100-year-old sweet root. When his wife ate it, he thought he had poisoned her. She became pale and weak, and he feared he had killed her. Instead, a week later, she felt decades younger. For nearly 30 years, they had dreamed of having a child. They had watched friends raise families while they remained alone, saving almost 1 million crystals through years of hard work. They had once considered spending that fortune to treat their infertility, but by then they believed they were already too old. Then everything changed. After eating that mysterious plant, Ren's mother regained her vitality, and the following year she became pregnant without even trying. Ren had been their miracle. Now, as muffled sobs drifted from his room, the couple could only wonder why fate had given them such a precious gift, only to place such a cruel burden on him. The candles slowly burned lower, the celebration meal remained untouched, and the school contract on the table seemed to mock every sacrifice they had made. Meanwhile, Ren lay on his bed as his grief slowly turned into anger. The weak gray glow of the floating spore only reminded him of everything he had lost. He imagined the next 8 years at school, watching everyone else evolve their beasts while he sat with a creature that couldn't even mature properly. For a brief moment, a dark thought crossed his mind, but he immediately rejected it. He couldn't abandon his parents after everything they had done for him. Searching for something to distract himself, Ren reached for his favorite book, The Second Contract of the Wandering King. He had read it countless times. The story told of a legendary warrior who discovered a miraculous medicine deep within a dangerous forest. forest, allowing him to form a second contract with another beast. It was only a legend. Throughout history, only the king and a handful of legendary warriors had ever obtained a second contracted beast, and none had revealed how they achieved it. Still, Ren couldn't stop himself from looking out the window toward the dark forest beyond the city's outskirts. For a moment, he wondered if that medicine might truly exist. The idea quickly collapsed. Even his father, strengthened by a mature iron rank plant, had barely survived his only journey into that forest. Ren possessed nothing but a useless spore and a miserable 10% increase in strength. He wasn't even strong enough to lift the heavier flour sacks at the kitchen. Staring bitterly at the floating creature, he asked why fate had chosen him to receive the impossible 1 in 10,000 result. The spore gave no answer. Listening to his parents' worried voices from the next room, Ren realized he couldn't bear being the cause of their suffering. Yet the contract could never be broken unless he found another way. His eyes returned to the forest outside. The attempt would almost certainly be suicide. With such a weak beast, mana poisoning alone would kill him in less than 3 days if he ventured too far. But as he thought about the years of humiliation waiting for him, Ren opened his worn book again. The Wandering King hadn't just found a miraculous medicine. According to the legend, it had been hidden deep within dragon territory, where mana flowed so densely it was visible in the air. Ren reopened his worn copy of The Second Contract of the Wandering King, carefully tracing the illustrations of the dragons. According to the legend, the Wandering King hadn't only discovered a miraculous medicine, but had also gathered priceless knowledge while traveling through the lands ruled by the dragon lords. Each dragon governed a different evolutionary path. The red dragon ruled over fire beasts and reptiles, where even tiny lizards could breathe flames. The blue dragon commanded the oceans and every creature within them. The green dragon watched over the forests, controlling beasts and plants alike. The white dragon ruled the skies, while the black dragon governed creatures of darkness and shadow. One illustration showed the articulated dragon, whose domain was filled with giant insects and creatures covered in exoskeletons. As Ren turned another page, he paused at the dragon of decay, the ruler of fungi, spores, and every creature that thrived on decomposition. Looking at the tiny gray spore floating beside him, he muttered bitterly that at least dragons respected the creatures under their rule. Unlike humans, the dragons lived far beyond human territory. Humanity had deliberately built its cities where mana was scarce because powerful beasts avoided such places. The lack of mana protected people from stronger monsters. Only weak, starving creatures, usually driven out of the forest, wandered near human settlements. Desperate from mana starvation, they attacked anything they encountered, no matter their nature. Ren remembered the stories his father had told him about the forest's edge. Even normally peaceful beasts became violent from hunger, ignoring their own wounds as they searched for mana. But that danger existed only on the outskirts. Dragon territory was far worse. With a beast as weak as the spore, dense mana itself could become deadly. Still, Ren remembered that the ruined place his father had once discovered was near the beginning of the bronze ring and could be approached through the middle of the iron ring. If he was lucky, perhaps he wouldn't need to reach the true dragon territories at all. He wasn't dreaming of finding the legendary medicine that granted a second beast. He would settle for anything capable of removing the spore from his body or changing his fate, something like the mysterious plant that had restored his mother's health years ago. Even so, the idea sounded insane. His spore offered almost no protection, and he might not survive his very first encounter with a monster. Yet, as he listened to his parents quietly crying in the next room, he realized he couldn't think of any other path. As night fell, determination slowly replaced hesitation, and his growling stomach reminded him he hadn't eaten. Quietly leaving his room, Ren crept into the kitchen. The celebration meal his parents had prepared still sat untouched. He packed bread, sweet root stew wrapped in clean cloth, and several wild berries. Remembering his father's advice, he took the berries because they helped keep the mind clear during exhaustion. He also gathered the smallest kitchen knife, a worn canteen, rope, his father's treasured map, and finally a flint for starting fires. It wasn't much, but it was everything he could carry. Just then, footsteps echoed through the house. Ren hurried back to his room, hiding the packed bag beneath his bed moments before his mother entered. She gently stroked his hair and apologized for being unable to buy him a better egg. Ren assured her it wasn't her fault or his father's. It had simply been bad luck. She offered him some warm stew, but Ren quietly promised he would eat tomorrow. The lie hurt, especially after she kissed his forehead and told him she loved him. Once the house finally fell silent, Ren secured a rope to his bedpost and opened his bedroom window. Outside, nearly a dozen moons illuminated the night, and beyond the city stretched the dark forest that held his only chance to change his destiny. After whispering an apology to his parents, Ren shouldered his backpack, gripped the rope, and began climbing down into the night. Ren landed quietly in the garden behind his house, where his parents' mature iron-rank plants still maintained a small herb and vegetable patch. Although they no longer owned the property, they were allowed to use the garden to help pay the rent and provide food for the family. Just beyond the wooden fence, the land sloped into vast, dark plains that marked the edge of civilization. There were no walls or guards protecting this part of the city. Their homes stood among the last buildings before the wilderness began. Most people avoided living so close to the frontier because monster hordes could invade if the army ever failed to hold the abyss. Ren never understood that fear. In all 10 years of his life, and even during the 30 years before that, according to his parents, the army had never allowed the hordes to break through. He unfolded his father's old map and carefully followed every mark. He knew the story by heart. Years ago, when medicine for mana poisoning became impossible to find, his father had been forced to enter monster territory. During that desperate journey, he had nearly died before discovering what looked like an ancient underground tunnel hidden beneath the earth. Believing it dated back to a time before mana spread across the world, his father had mapped every landmark in remarkable detail, despite swearing he would never return. An hour later, Ren reached the forest's edge without encountering a single starving beast. The spore floated silently beside him as the quiet forest stretched ahead. Healthy monsters rarely approached the Manipur border near human lands. Only the organized monster hordes crossed these regions through underground routes, and the army had long learned how to intercept them before they reached civilization. Trying to steady his nerves, Ren reminded himself that they should remain relatively safe until reaching the deeper iron forest. He studied the first section of the map one last time. If the hidden tunnel truly existed, it would allow him to travel much farther into dangerous territory without immediately facing the monsters above. Before entering the forest, Ren looked back toward his distant home. His parents were probably still awake, worrying about the future they believed awaited him. Quietly apologizing to them, he stepped into the wilderness. The faint gray glow of the spore disappeared beneath the light of the 12 moons as the journey to change his fate truly began. The first 3 kilometers felt endless. Ren carefully stayed near the Manipur boundary where stronger beasts refused to roam, but his father had warned him that 2 dangerous creatures still lived there. The first were moon toads, small blue amphibians, no larger than rabbits. Under moonlight, they were nearly invisible except for their 3 glowing eyes, which could paralyze anyone who looked directly at them. They hunted in groups before dissolving helpless prey with acid. The second threat was even worse. Night excavators were enormous, iron-rank beasts the size of cows that dug intricate tunnel systems beneath the ground. Their massive claws could tear a person apart, and their hidden burrows often collapsed beneath unsuspecting travelers. Keeping his eyes on the ground, Ren tested every step while searching for the giant dead tree his father had marked as the entrance to the secret tunnel. Suddenly, a faint blue flash appeared in the corner of his vision. He forced himself not to look. Another flash appeared, closer than before. A soft croak echoed from his left, then another answered from the right. The moon toads were surrounding him. Repeating his father's warning to never meet their eyes, Ren kept moving as calmly as he could. Then the ground creaked beneath his foot. His heart nearly stopped. It wasn't the sound of a toad. It was the unmistakable warning of Earth collapsing above a night excavator's tunnel. Retreating meant running into the moon toads. Advancing meant falling into an excavator's burrow. Before he could decide, another blue flash appeared directly in front of him. For the briefest instant, Ren saw the creature's 3 glowing eyes. His muscles immediately began to go numb. Croaking surrounded him from every direction as the moon toads closed in, and he could already hear the wet sound of acid forming on their skin. Ren instinctively shut his eyes, but it was already too late. For a split second, he had looked directly into the moon toad's 3 glowing eyes. The hypnotic effect immediately spread through his body, and his muscles began going numb. Around him, the melodious croaking grew louder as the toads closed in from every direction. He could hear their footsteps and smell the foul acid gathering on their skin. Just as the paralysis worsened, the spore suddenly fused with his body. Ren wanted to curse his useless beast. A small increase in strength and glowing mushrooms on his head were the last things he needed. Instead of helping, they seemed more likely to attract even more predators. But something unexpected happened. The lead moon toad stopped advancing. Its 3 glowing eyes blinked out of rhythm, and its hypnotic croak became confused. The mushrooms growing from Ren's hair emitted a strange bioluminescent glow that closely resembled the patterns inside the moon toad's own bodies. Somehow, the spore had created a distorted imitation of the creatures themselves. The leader leaped toward Ren, completely distracted by the glowing mushrooms. At that exact moment, the ground beneath it collapsed. The toad had landed on top of a hidden night excavator tunnel. The earth gave way, and its frightened cry was cut short by a deep roar rising from below, followed by the unmistakable sound of enormous jaws snapping shut. The remaining moon toads froze in panic. At the same instant, the broken hypnotic pattern released Ren from paralysis. Without wasting another second, he jumped away from the collapsing ground. Watching where the tunnels appeared, he suddenly realized they followed a pattern. Night excavators built their burrows systematically, with one main entrance surrounded by hidden trap tunnels. As Ren ran, another section of Earth collapsed. 2 more moon toads, chasing after him, fell straight into another hidden tunnel. Their screams ended just as abruptly as the first. Terrified, the last surviving toad fled into the darkness. Only after putting some distance between himself and the tunnels did Ren finally stop to catch his breath. The glowing mushrooms still pulsed on his head, but now they had saved his life instead of embarrassing him. Quietly, he thanked the spore. It was still the weakest beast in existence, but this time it had helped him survive. His relief lasted only a moment. A distant roar from beneath the ground reminded him that night excavators were still nearby. He quickly refocused on finding the dead tree that marked the entrance to the secret tunnel. Then another sound echoed through the forest. A metallic scraping, like blades dragging across stone. Even the underground roars suddenly went silent. Ren hid behind a nearby tree as something enormous emerged from the deeper forest. It was a mirror mantis. The bronze-rank beast was nearly the size of a horse, its body covered in reflective plates that scattered the moonlight. But this creature was badly injured. Its armor was cracked, one of its massive scythes had broken near the tip, and deep wounds covered its body. Ren immediately understood the danger. Mirror mantises belong deep within the bronze ring and should never appear anywhere near the human border. This one had clearly been defeated and driven from its territory. Starving and wounded, it had been forced into the Manipur outskirts in search of food. That made it even more dangerous than a healthy predator. The creature turned its dull, hungry eyes toward Ren. Normally, mirror mantises hunted by creating magical reflections that confused their prey, but its injuries had weakened those abilities. Instead, a stray reflection bounced off its damaged plates and exposed Ren's hiding place. The mantis charged. Despite its wounds, its speed was overwhelming. One of its giant scythes struck the ground beside Ren, missing him by inches as the displaced air sliced across his cheek. Ren sprinted with everything he had. Then, through the darkness, he finally spotted the twisted silhouette of the dead tree. The entrance to the hidden tunnel was within reach, but the wounded mirror mantis was closing the distance with every step, and the sound of its broken armor echoed behind him like death itself. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you liked the video. Stay tuned for the next part and upcoming videos.